So hi everyone, welcome. I know that we still have some people joining us, but we're very tight on time today. So we're going to dive right in to the session, and we want to welcome you this afternoon. Our session is called Active Learning in the Virtual Classroom. My name is Ali Bach. I'm here with my colleagues Karen Galley and Susanna Wexler. And before we go further, I want to just kind of start by sharing with you our basic premise as educators, which is that we believe that students learn best when they're active participants in the classroom. And I know that most of you probably share this view with me and have a strong sense of how to engage students actively when we're in the face-to-face classroom with them. But it can be more difficult, I think, to see how those same techniques translate when we're holding a class virtually. And so, however, our premise is that the virtual classroom is not like an impediment, it's just different. And that most of the things that you could do in the face-to-face classroom, you can still do in the virtual classroom. And that there are even some things that you can't do in the face-to-face classroom that you can do in the virtual classroom that are very cool. So this session is going to be experiential. We're going to share with you some cool tools and techniques and hopefully get you guys psyched for the new semester. Okay, so we would like to start off by talking a little bit about polls. And you're going to see a poll pop up on your screen. The question is, in what capacity have you used polling with students? And so just take a moment to read through the choices and decide which best represents your answer. Have you used it in face-to-face classes? Have you used it in remote and online classes, or have you never used it before? And so the cool thing one of the tough things about online teaching, I think, is that you can't always see your students. So if in a face-to-face classroom, I might start off a lesson on MLA format by asking my students, how many of you have ever written a paper in MLA format before? And I ask a question like this to get a sense of, am I just reviewing material that my students already know, or am I introducing something new to them? When you're teaching virtually, it can be harder if you can't get all of your students on the screen at the same time, you can't really ask that question and see all the hands shoot up. So a poll is a great way to kind of take the temperature of your class and see, what percentage of them are familiar with material, or what percentage of them are feeling this way, or what percentage of them know the answer to a question. So here are our results. You should be able to see the results now. And it looks like we have the majority of people have used polling in their face-to-face classes. And some of you have used it in remote classes, and some of you have never used it before. So, but I think you probably have used it in your face-to-face class. Like if you've asked your students a question, how many of you have blah, blah, blah? And then you ask them to raise their hands, you have used polling. And so polling is a cool tool that you can use in the virtual class to just get a sense of where your students are with the material. I think we have one more poll question for you. So we're interested to know this. What software are you planning to use to deliver your remote classes in the fall? So we know that you have choices. There's Zoom, WebEx, Canvas Conference, Microsoft Teams. If you're not sure, pick the one that sounds good to you. But take a moment to just make a choice and give us a sense of what you're thinking in terms of what software you're going to use to deliver your classes. And one thing I'll say while we're waiting for the results to come through is that most of these, there we go. So we have, it looks like we're split pretty evenly between Zoom and WebEx. And so what I'll say is that most of these platforms have similar functionalities. There are similar things that you can do with them, but you make different moves in order to do those things. So this session is not going to really be about teaching you how to do each thing. Like we're not going to teach you how to do a poll because it's a little bit different to set it up in each of the different softwares. But it is available in the different softwares. So we'll be sharing with you some links towards the end of the session to give you some tips on how to do it in the different kind of platforms that you might use. Okay, so that's polling. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let me share with you our agenda for the session. So we're going to start by examining ways for students to build connections and create conversations in the virtual classroom. We'll talk about ways to create student-centered opportunities for learning, and we'll finish up by talking about how to leverage interactive assessments to see what your students have learned. And to kind of orient us to our ideas for this topic today, we're using this best practices model from Columbia University Center for Teaching and Learning. And their guiding principle is that we should use tools in the virtual classroom to create opportunities for students to actively engage with the course material every 3 to 5 minutes. So if you think about the face-to-face classroom, and if you've ever looked out into your classroom and you see a sea of blank faces, or they're looking out the window, or they're dreaming about lunch, and then you try to snap them to attention, that's the same thing that we're trying to do, except we've got to be, I think, even more proactive about it, because there are so many more distractions that students might face in the virtual classroom. So this is our basic rule of thumb, is that we're calling them back to attention through some sort of activity. And these are some examples of some of the things that we'll share with you. So building connections through webcam and mic, allowing every student to talk in breakout rooms, creating class conversations through chat, assessing student learning and opinions through polls, collaborating in real time through live note taking, and providing feedback and accountability by grading each session. We'll start by talking about how to build connections and create conversations. And so in a face-to-face class, you know that it's really important to create a sense of community in your class so that students feel comfortable learning and sharing together. That can be harder in a virtual classroom, but it's not impossible. And so 3 of the ways that I'm going to talk to you about how to kind of build these connections between students and to make people feel comfortable creating these conversations. I'm going to talk about how to leverage chat. I'm going to talk about breakout rooms, and I'm going to talk about pulse checks using emoticons. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to tell you guys about, and we're actually going to try it out right now, so get ready, is leveraging chat to stimulate interest. And so one of the cool things about a virtual class is that a chat can be running in the background while students are learning, and they can just ask questions or answer questions right into the chat, and you don't have to kind of pause and take out time to call on each individual student. And so I have a question for you guys here today, and I would like you to put your answer in the chat. And so the question is, how do you use active learning in your face-to-face classes? So in your face-to-face classes, what are the active learning techniques that you feel are kind of tried and true that you turn to? You'll see we're using WebEx training today for the session, and the layout is a little bit different than maybe what you're used to. So in order to share ideas in the chat, what you have to do is mouse up at the top of the screen, where I think you'll see, like, it says viewing Carangalli's applications. If you put your mouse up there, you will see a place that you can put a chat. So you'll click the chat button, and then that will open the opportunity for you to share your ideas in the chat. So do it, my students. Tell me, what are your techniques that you use? One more thing I'm going to ask you to do is to make sure that you send to all participants your questions. So just make sure that you have that selected. So how do you use active learning in your face-to-face classes? What are your examples? So I see some examples coming in already, such as think, pair, share, such as group work, asking questions to make it more interactive, using small groups, chat, asking students questions, polling, students teaching each other, and problem solving on the spot or cold calling, definitely. And I'm hearing that the all participants option is grayed out. So guess what? We will read them to you. And so actually this is a good thing for me to mention, which is that you have different options when you're chatting. So again, we're using WebEx training, which has some different functionality than the regular WebEx that you're going to be using in your classes. But you can have students chat directly with you, and then you can just read the answers out. You can have students chat with the entire class, which is not working well right now, but, it is what it is. We're dealing with it. Or you can have students even chat with each other. So So you can assign a chat partner to a student, and you can say, send your chat directly to this person in the chat, and they can chat back and forth with each other the same way that you would have them do a think, pair, share, or something like this. And so this is a good way for everyone to share their voice. It's great for students who are maybe quieter and who don't want to raise their hand and speak in class because they can still share. They can still share virtually. Okay, so that's leveraging chat to stimulate interest. Okay, now next question for you guys: how could you translate those same face-to-face activities to a virtual environment? And for this one, I want to try something different, which is to actually have one of you turn your mic on and share your ideas with us. Okay? So the question is, how could you translate those face-to-face activities to a virtual environment? So I want an example of some sort of a virtual activity that you see that would still be an example of active learning. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hand in order to share that. So how do we raise our hand? Because I can't see you all. So, Karen, if you advance. You've got to go up to make sure that you have the participants panel open. So again, if you move your mouse up to the top of the screen, you can click where it says participants. And then it will bring up a panel that lists the panelists' names. You'll see a bunch of icons. And Karen, if you go to the next slide. On the bottom left corner where that box is, there's a little hand icon. And you can click that to raise your hand. And so this is a good way to manage your students' participation. If you don't want everyone to unmute themselves and call out at the same time, as you can ask them to raise their hand. And you'll get a little icon next to them that lets you know that they want to be called on. So my friends, raise your hand if you would like to share with us an example of a way that you think you could translate your active learning activity to the virtual class. I see that Katniss Weeding has her hand raised. So, Katie, thank you very much. Would you unmute yourself? I hope you're able to. This is a little bit of trial and error. Karen, can she unmute? Oh, great. Okay, Katie, what are your ideas?
Okay, am I... Okay. So when we first went remotely, I was going to have my students do group presentations. I'm using that more. I think group presentations are great. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this online? So it worked out so well. I put them in their teams to work out their group presentations. They shared their projects with me, their Prezzies or their PowerPoint. I couldn't figure out how to get them to do it. So they met in their small groups. I called them back together, and each team presented their projects, and they were just as good. Actually, the quality of the presentations, I think, was a little better than it has been in face-to-face. So that project went seamlessly online, and it worked out really well.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Can we take, I would love to take just one more volunteer, and I saw that Eric Adamson had his hand raised. So can we unmute Eric so that he can share an idea with us?
Okay, I'm unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. So I play a game with my students when we're practicing in English 102 sort of data gathering and then sort of analyzing that data. So we play Would You Rather, where you ask these kind of silly questions that have two sort of ridiculous outcomes, and then you put that information together and we say, okay, what can we say about our class based on these polls? So basically, it worked really well online by just transferring those questions into polls. I didn't use polls within the system that I was using, but I use Google Forms and sometimes the Microsoft Forms. But it worked really well, and especially with the chat on the side, because students could talk about all the weird implications of the question. So, for example, one question is, would you rather have spaghetti hair that regrows every night or sweat maple syrup? All right, so students are both deciding and thinking about the poll, but also in the chat being able to say, but you would be gross all night if you fought maple syrup and, things like that. So it works really great.
Awesome. That's a cool idea. Thank you so much for sharing. And so just to kind of comment upon what we've done so far, we have options, right, for how to build these conversations. And so one option is through the chat. And that's great for if you just want like quick comments. Another option is to have your students unmute themselves and speak to the whole group, which is great when you want to give people a little bit more time to share their ideas that would maybe get lost in the chat. Another idea, Karen, if you advance to the next slide, is a breakout room. And so you could do this same exact activity, but instead of kind of doing it in real time in your class, you can send your students to a breakout room. We're going to give you this experience today. We were having a little bit of trouble with the technology of WebEx training, so we are going to not risk it. But this is an example of an assignment that you could give for a breakout room, right? Please designate one person in your group to take notes in a Google Doc. A Google Doc or any sort of collaborative document is a great way for note-taking for group work because all students can see it and collaborate and share and type at the same time. And you could ask them questions to answer as part of their group, the same exact questions that I just asked you, and then you send them into the group for a period of time. The breakout rooms will send, you decide how many students you want to be in each group. So let's say you're like, I want 4 students in this group. It randomly assigns the students to groups. You also have options for manually assigning students to groups. It sends them to a separate kind of chat area where they can talk to each other. And then when you're ready, you pull them back. You also have options to pop in and out of the room if you want to go and talk to them and see what they're doing. Okay? So breakout rooms are another really cool function anytime that you're doing a sort of small group activity. And so, Karen, if you would advance one more. Once you pull them back from the breakout room, you can also ask your students to share their screen, or you can share your screen to show that collaborative document that they were working on. This is an example of what the screen sharing would look like. Again, every platform has a different kind of way to share your screen, but usually if you move your mouse around, you're going to find somewhere something that looks like this, and then you have the option of sharing your PowerPoint or your whole desktop or an application or something like this. Okay, next slide. And so you have here are just a bunch of different ideas for how you could use breakout rooms to kind of generate conversations among your students. So before you introduce a new concept, you could do a think, pair, share in a breakout room to surface prior knowledge for your students on what you're about to teach them. You could also assign small groups to meet before you have a discussion with the rest of the class. So maybe each group gets their own question, and then you come back to the rest of the class and they teach the class the answer to their question. You could also do kind of a turn and talk. So you pose a question to the whole class and then say, I'm going to send you to your breakout rooms, and then I'm going to bring you back after you've had a chance to talk about your answers. You can assign group quizzes. So you can put a quiz on Canvas, assign one person in the group to be the leader, and then the students can work together in the breakout room to fill out the quiz. You could assign small groups for problem solving or case studies. The breakout room is the perfect place for your students to go to kind of work through those ideas. You can have them meet in breakout rooms to compare lecture notes and to fill in any gaps. So like if you've just done a lecture, send them in there and then let them compare notes and see if they missed anything that their partner has. Or finally, you can ask students to meet in breakout rooms to find quote unquote real life examples of something. So maybe an image or a video that they can then screen share when they get back to show the rest of the class this is what our group came up. Okay, so breakout rooms. Okay, so now it's time for a pulse check. How are you feeling about everything that you've learned so far? What I want you to do is I want you to select an emoticon that best represents your mood and share it with the group. So if you look on your participants panel, you will see a little yellow guy for me, he has sunglasses on right now, and that's how I'm feeling, so I'm going to pick him. So take a moment to kind of decide, who am I today? Which emoticon am I? Oh, I see some happy faces. Wonderful. And I don't see I don't think I see anybody snoozing yet, so that's great. I think this is a cool feature because, again, it can snap our students back, right? Like, hey, maybe I've been talking for a little while and you're maybe not listening as closely as I want you to be. So let's do a pulse check and let's see where you're at with this. And it can give students a chance, like if they're like, I have major questions, they can use the emoticon to show that. If they're not, if they're just not feeling it today and they're in a bad mood, when you're in the face-to-face class, you can see them, but they can use an emoticon to let you know, like, this is not the day today for me to be super engaged in class. So know that you have this option that you can have students share their emoticons to kind of see where they're at. Okay, and now I think it's time for a question break. So I'm going to toss the reins over to Susanna, and we're just going to take a couple minutes to answer some questions that you guys might have. In the chat, questions that you posted in the chat. So Susanna, you're muted.
Thank you. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions. I know that I've addressed some of the questions in the chat. What platform are we using right now? Excellent question, and the answer is WebEx training. So I know there was a question right above this about whether or not you could do breakout rooms in WebEx. The answer is yes, and WebEx training, and we will be sending directions on how to do that after the
And can I just add to that, Susanna, that my understanding is that regular WebEx will have breakout rooms enabled in September.
Oh, okay, that's wonderful. Wonderful news to know. So I know there was another question earlier about whether or not we have the capability to hold classes for, I think, longer than an hour. I need to look into that and probably contact Patricia Clay. I don't know if Karen or Allie know the answer to that.
I do.
Okay, Karen.
So I think the question was about Zoom and using it for over 40 minutes.
Yes.
So recently Zoom disabled time limits for educator accounts. But
I was actually going to say, yeah.
But you do have to be registered using your school email. It has to be .edu. And it's a recent development.
I actually did over the summer. I just didn't know if there was any sort of official thing. Any other questions? And please feel free to type them into the chat. Oh, Canvas conferences, longer times, the polls are recorded, and breakout rooms in comfort. So that's good to know. And I would, if you haven't done so already, I would definitely recommend just kind of playing around with whatever platform you plan to use before the semester begins, just to get a sense of those things. Anything else before we move on? Are students visible to each other in Canvas conferences? Has anyone, I've never used Canvas. I believe they are. I think I used them actually like once or twice.
Yes,
but
they are. They are.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the public chat is. Okay, that's good to know. Anything else? All right, Karen, I don't know if you want to move on to the next portion.
So, it's my turn. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen. So I'm going to talk about engaging content. When we think about how to create content or a lesson for our students, we need to think about, is it visually appealing? Are the colors vibrant? Is it an interesting video? Will our students think it's interesting? Which I think is, the big question, right? I'm going to talk about how to sort of navigate these items. But I want to remind you that we can use images, we can use video, but we can also use VR video. How cool would that be for our students to have content where they have to click around and it's actually a 360 view of an image that pertains to the lesson. So here are the 4 items that I want you to think about. Visual appeal, as I said before. Can you also embed links to your main or supplementary text? Can you embed action-oriented tasks for your students to, click on to be engaged with the content? And lastly, insert some type of check in the content so that you can measure where your student is in terms of understanding. So I want to share with you this image that has buttons embedded. I do have to switch programs for this. Okay, so isn't that pretty? Okay, so here's my short little image. Hopefully you can see my button. When I click on a button, a box pops up with the content that I want my students to read and a link to an external reading. Okay. I'm going to go back to the image, close out this box. Here's another button. Hopefully this image is eye-catching and vibrant. Same setup. It's my content with a link. Now, here is something that's sort of interesting. You can also attach an audio file to these buttons. So your student can click on the link and it can be your voice speaking to your student, or it could be just an audio file of something that you want to share with your student. Another button, same concept, same items that have been applied. But here's this last one, my exclamation point. I have a checkpoint for my students. I have a link here that takes them to our Microsoft forms, and it's tied to the student's email address. So once they have completed all those readings from the buttons on the image, they are forced to this quiz to complete your questions, and they hit submit. You can go from the back end, pull the report, and see how your students are doing with this lesson. And all the while, they can watch the butterflies flutter. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so not only will we have sort of these engaging content images, there will be times when you want to share audio with your students. And I encourage you to do it. It's an awesome way for our students to experience the lesson in a different medium. Okay? So it's not so important what video it is that I'm going to share with you, but I just want you to listen. And I'm going to play two files for you. So just listen to this file. I wanted to create this video in order to demonstrate how I made part of our... Okay, so that was audio clip 1. Now I want you to hear this clip. Katie from the Hudson Children's Library. In response to several questions that I received about Hudson virtual escape rooms at Tiger, I wanted to create this video in order to demonstrate how I made part of our virtual escape room come to life. And it is the image of this set. So when participants of our escape room move their cursor. Okay, so hopefully you heard a difference between the two different audio files. The first file, my mic here was picking up the sound from my speaker. My speaker's way over there. That can be problematic, right? The second file that you listened to was me sending the audio file directly to your computer and it playing through your speaker so that the student can hear it much more clearer. I hope that was your experience. But, you know, that small tweak, I think, is worth all these extra clicks so that your student can actually hear the content and participate with your next part of your lesson. So, Susanna. And
I'm up on the top here. So, okay, so I'd like everyone now to take, Karen, sorry, do I have the slides? Karen?
sorry, yes.
So yeah, I'd like the Kahoot.it. And again, I'll put it in the chat, and please raise your hand on the virtual screen when you are there. All right. So Karen, I'm sorry, Karen, do I have access to share the screen?
It's coming.
Share the screen, my desktop, and you're all logged into Kahoot. We are going to play, we'll play a quiz. So I will set it up. You will soon receive a login number, which will be on my screen. It is 948512, and type that in to the Kahoot on your phone, and you will get some questions. Write your name. I'm going to take it too. All right, so we'll start. And I'll say that the questions will be on my screen. They'll correspond with shapes on your phone. Choose the shape that corresponds with the correct answer. So what are some ways that you can engage students in a remote class? Choose the corresponding shape on your phone. Let's see. The answers they're rolling in. All right, looks like we have 22 with the correct answer, which is all of the above. Polls, quizzes, and breakout rooms are all ways that you can engage students in your remote classes. All right, let's go on to a nice job, Alana, first place. So as you might be able to tell, the students are scored based on both the correct answer and the timeliness of their answer. So, all right, we'll go on to the next question. Question 2 out of 2. Which of the following strategies do you think will be the most useful in your fall 2020 class? Again, choose the answer, the shape of your phone that corresponds to that here. All right. All right. So it looks like breakout rooms are the most popular, followed by interactive videos, and then polls and quizzes are tied. I will say there was no incorrect answer. Let's see, however, who is rising to the top of the podium. It looks like LaShonda is in third place. Monica's in second. And Casey is in first, so great job, everybody. All right, we're gonna leave the site. The slides back. All right, so that's one example of an interactive assessment that you can use throughout class just to check on students' learning, take their pulse, really bring them back to the screen if they've wandered off of it. I will warn, however, I think for me personally, if I'm going to use, I'm a little concerned about just equity issues. So I think that I'm probably going to give my students some sort of survey at the beginning of the semester about their readiness for online learning that will include a question like, what devices are you using? And I probably will not use that if I find that students only have phones. As you see, you kind of need multiple devices. However, you do want to assess students' learning, just like in a face-to-face class. You want students to be engaged, you want them to participate and have fun, but ultimately you want them to be learning. So you can, and I think should always be using formal methods of assessment, including Canvas quizzes, essays, presentations. Katie just mentioned how well presentations can go in a virtual class. You can also ask students to make videos where they explain their learning. You can also, however, leverage technology for more informal assessments, just like in Kahoot. So there's another program, Quizlet, you can use. You can also check for understanding throughout using these yes/no tabs. If you go next to the hand raising, the raised hand on the panel, you'll see it check for yes and an X for no. So periodically you can ask your class questions like I can ask you all now, are quizzes a way to assess student learning? Check yes if you think the answer is yes, check no if you think the answer is no. And I'll see in a second. Okay, good. Catherine said yes. That's great. No. Oh, Eric Adamson says yes, too. That's wonderful. Going through, so just check yes if you think quizzes are an assessment tool. No. Mike Welty says yes. Wonderful. Bruce says yes. So in class, I might go through this and I might see either people aren't answering for some reason, or maybe I need to talk a bit more about quizzes as a tool of assessment. So this is a way, again, to kind of keep the pulse of students, but also for me to get some quick information about what they may or may not understand about the lesson. Other ways you can leverage our new technology to assess student learning are through the discussion boards. You can post like an exit card assignment where at the end of class, students post to the discussion board, summarize what you learned in class today. What do you still have questions about? Also, I did this in my summer class, and some questions, are really only pertinent to that one student. I would answer them. Sometimes I noticed that 8 or 9 students had the same question, in which case I would make sure that I addressed that in the next lesson and then kind of develop assessment questions from around there. You could also ask about what the kind of muddiest or most unclear point in the lesson was. Students could explain on the discussion board, and then you can kind of go and clarify it. So those are all different ways that we can leverage technology to assess our students' learning. Yeah, so have fun, have a great semester. Remember, every 3 to 5 minutes, try to engage your students, continue to encourage their participation, and ultimately, you want to be assessing whether or not they're learning the material that you want them to learn. So, any final questions? Again, you can put them in the chat. Oh, thank you, Katie. Does anyone have any questions or anything else to add at all? Anything that may have, has worked for you in the past? All right, I'd like to thank everybody then for coming to our presentation, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, the COL is a wonderful resource. Feel free to reach out to them as well.
I would like to share our presentation with everyone.
Okay, and I think Joseph Gallo had a question about problem screen sharing videos. Has anyone had any problems with that? All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So Joseph Gallo was wondering if anyone's had any problems screen sharing videos. I'll say, Joseph, I know that you teach film, so I don't know if you're referring to that. I've never tried to stream a huge video, like anything more than 3 minutes.
So the best practices for streaming video is that you have it downloaded to your desktop. If you're just playing it from a website, it's going to be problematic. I've never had a completely smooth experience playing a longer file. That's one. Number two is if students are using Chromebooks, there is likely to be a problem. Right now, we have our presentation going on. I have this running on my desktop. I have a Chromebook next to me. The Chromebook has none of the capabilities that we have been engaging in this presentation. So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
I also wanted to mention one more thing about the breakout rooms. I mean, Susanna mentioned that we are using WebEx training right now. And we know from IT that breakout rooms are coming soon to WebEx. I would strongly advise that you wait until that tool is open in WebEx meetings or WebEx personal rooms. The application we're using now is more of a corporate function. It's used for like corporate training classes. There are a lot of bells and whistles that have made it really cumbersome. So I would recommend waiting till it's actually released in the regular WebEx.
Or using a different software, right? Like if they use Canvas conferences, they have breakout rooms there, right?
Yeah. So all the other applications, they have breakout rooms already enabled. I am going to share with you our presentation that also has a link to our handout with resources that you can click through to get started on using the application of your choice. Anything else?
So, sorry, I'm responding to just also the question that you can't ask the student to share a video either. I will say that in Zoom, I don't know about WebEx. In Zoom, you can enable student screen sharing, so students can share their screens, and I assume that if they have a video on their screen that they can share it, they'd be able to share it. I don't know. I don't know if anyone can speak to the capabilities of WebEx. I don't know.
Actually, I used WebEx personal rooms in the spring semester, and I used it extensively with my students in all different types of sharing capacities, and it was great. Good. That worked. Anything else?
Okay, well,
I just want to
so very much. Yeah, and make sure that you download, that you click the link that Karen shared to get our slides, and the other resources that we're sharing. Feel free to reach out with any questions. And Karen and Susanna, do you have anything else?
No, thank everybody. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great semester.
Yeah, definitely. All right.